March 2024. The frigid air in the Garland PD evidence storage room felt frozen for over 3 decades. Investigator Daniel Hart's flashlight beam swept across the old sealed boxes, illuminating the thick layer of dust on the evidence bag labeled Case Number 90, 2147. "Control, I need forensics down in storage now." Immediately, his voice echoed among the steel shelves, heavy as if he'd just awakened something that shouldn't be touched. What started as a routine sweep by the cold case unit suddenly became a discovery that upended the entire Garland 1990 case. In the torn-edged evidence bag, Daniel saw a piece of dark blue fabric, and caught in those threads was something no one expected still existed: a human hair preserved by time for 34 years. Before diving deep into the most haunting case Garland ever faced, take a second to hit subscribe and like the video. Your support helps forgotten stories find their way back to the light, and keeps the almighty algorithm from missing any future videos. Because that tiny discovery in the evidence bag was just the first domino. When the Austin lab confirmed that hair matched a Garland resident from 1990, the case thought long dead suddenly sprang back to life. And that led to countless questions. Where did the brown caprice that mysteriously vanished just a year after the case really go? Why did the crushed frame in Irving have a piece of fabric identical to the one found at Duck Creek? Why did Hal Brenner's medical records, a man once interviewed then cleared of suspicion, note an unusual bite mark right after the night Evan disappeared? But what makes this case especially haunting isn't just the physical evidence. It's the truth that for 34 years, the man police were looking for might have lived among the community, participated in activities, attended Evan memorials, looked into the Ramsey family's eyes, and no one knew what he carried. Tonight we'll go back to Garland in 1990, trace Evan Cole Ramsey's footsteps from that fateful homecoming night, reopen every dusty page of the file, and explore the forensic breakthrough that finally started melting Texas's coldest case. This is a story of silence, fear, buried memories, and justice that's delayed but never truly gone. Garland, Texas, on a warm fall evening, when the small town still echoed with the breath of homecoming, the lights from Garland High's field cast a soft golden glow into the sky, as if reluctant to let go of the day. Groups of students left the parking lot with laughter still mixing in the breeze, while a few distant radios played the last songs of the 90s. In that crowd, Evan Cole Ramsey stepped out with a thin jacket draped loosely over his arm, his face still slightly flushed like a guy who'd just had a fun night. He said quick goodbyes to a few friends, then decided to walk home via the familiar route along Duck Creek Greenbelt, the path he'd taken countless times after practice, after games, after wanting to breathe the quiet Garland air before heading in. As Evan moved away from the school, the music and chatter gradually faded into the distance. Sparse streetlights cast long streaks of light on the asphalt, making his shadow stretch out as if drifting slowly across each sidewalk section. He passed houses with lights dimming, lawns where a few pickup trucks sat motionless like they were asleep, then gradually entered the park area along the creek, where the smell of damp earth and insect sounds grew more pronounced. The space grew quieter, only his steady footsteps and the crunch of dry leaves blown by the wind on the ground. When he turned onto the trail by the creek, everything unfolded like hundreds of times before. No one noticed, no one looked, and there was no sign this walk would be different. The night continued calmly for everyone except Evan's mom. She sat on the old sofa in the living room, the table lamp casting a dim yellow glow on the family photo hanging on the wall. At first she thought Evan was just lingering with friends, even smiling as she imagined him excitedly recounting homecoming stories. But as the clock ticked into the late hours, as the landline phone stayed silent, and the front door never opened, the initial light waiting turned into heavy knots in her chest. She got up to pace, checked the clock, looked out the window so many times she lost count. The house's silence started feeling unfamiliar, like it was trying to tell her something she didn't want to hear. By dawn, as the street lights outside began to fade, and the sky turned to the gray-blue of morning, any hope that Evan was just late vanished too. The phone stayed quiet, no knock, no sign he was on his way. The family turned on lights everywhere, called every friend of Evan's, then drove slowly along the roads around Duck Creek, searching for any shadow, any movement. but everything was empty. No one knew where Evan was. No one had seen him return from the previous evening. In the moment worry turned to real fear, the family had to accept what they'd never imagined. Something unusual had happened, and they picked up the phone to call Garland police, reporting that Evan Cole Ramsey had vanished in the night. When Garland PD arrived at Evan's house that morning, the Texas sky was still hazy gray, thin mist clinging to lawns and wet roads as if the town had just woken up in vague unease. Evan's mom recounted the route her son usually took, her voice trembling with each mention of the trail along Duck Creek, a path he'd walked many evenings without issue. The first thing police did was reconstruct that route, from the high school area with its wide parking lot, turning into quiet residential streets, then leading to the Creekside Park, known for trees growing close together, creating long stretches of shadow. The family followed behind, each holding a flashlight, their long shadows on the wet pavement making everything feel heavier. As they neared Duck Creek Greenbelt, the air changed noticeably. Here, traffic sounds nearly vanished, replaced by the gentle flow of water over the shallow creek bed and early birds mixing with wind through tall trees. The dirt path into the trail still held overnight dew marks, and with no rain, the ground preserved imprints from the night before. Right there, as the search party fanned out to check the surrounding area, an officer noticed the ground near the edge of bushes looked more compressed than the rest. Not clear footprints, not definite skid marks, just a sense something had swept through, like someone running fast or waiting a long time then leaving. Others noted the soil along the left of the trail had lightly disturbed sections, drag marks a few feet long, but not clear enough to determine direction or number of people. Police ordered everyone to keep distance, no one step into anomalous areas, and the rest expanded the search toward the lawn near residences. Along a wooden fence of one house, an officer bent down close to the ground and pointed out to a colleague that fallen leaves here were fewer than elsewhere, as if someone or something had brushed it in the night. No one said it, but everyone felt those vague details were building a picture far different from initial guesses that Evan might have just gotten lost or stopped somewhere. The family didn't know. As they went deeper toward the creek bank, the water sound grew clearer. The stream sparkled in early light, flowing through tall grass clumps and small rocks, creating an oddly peaceful feel, completely opposite the tension in those standing there. An officer flashed a light under the small bridge, where kids often fished in summer, but saw only dark emptiness, no sign anyone had hidden or rested there. The search party lined up, scanning every patch of ground, every bush, every trail section. They called Evan's name a few times, voices echoing off the creek walls, then vanishing into silence. No response, no unusual sound beyond light wind. As they looped back through the second trail, a small branch toward eastern mobile homes, everything was similar. Soil slightly disturbed, some broken grass but not enough to conclude anything definite. No backpack, no clothes, no personal items, nothing bearing Evan's mark. Just his absence, a void larger than those vague ground marks. As sun rose clearer, police gathered at the lawn by the trailhead. They quickly assessed checked areas, noted points to revisit, and discussed expanding scope with the family. Evan's mom stood there, silently staring toward the trees, as if trying to picture where her son had gone, what he'd seen in his final minutes before vanishing. But no matter how hard she tried, that scene remained a dark full of questions. Up to that point, every search effort led to the same conclusion. Duck Creek Trail showed them neither where Evan was, nor where he'd gone next. Evan left no clear trace, and the only thing they had after that long morning search was a growing sense that his disappearance wasn't as simple as a teen staying out late and forgetting to come home. Evan Ramsey had vanished, and Duck Creek with its silent grasses and slightly disturbed ground answered nothing. When the search around Duck Creek yielded no clear results, police moved to the next step, knocking on every door along the route. Evan might have taken the night he vanished. That Garland morning passed with an odd pace. Families eating breakfast, kids prepping bikes for school, all interrupted by police in dark uniforms. Many had heard vague news of a missing student, but no one expected it tied to their own neighborhood. At the first house right by the Duck Creek Trail, a middle-aged woman said she stayed up late prepping for a weekend trip. She didn't see anyone on the road, but clearly remembered fast-running footsteps toward the creek bank, then sudden silence, like someone abruptly stopping or turning another way. She wasn't sure if it was Evans. She admitted she didn't think much of it then, since kids running loudly wasn't rare here. At the next house, an older man who'd lived here 3 decades said he heard something heavy hitting the ground, then wind whistling through trees, making him unsure if it was human or a large animal running by. He tried describing the sound, but the more he spoke, the more it mixed memory with guesswork. He just remembered something waking him. Heading to the houses across from the park, a young family reported hearing someone speaking very softly, late at night, but they couldn't tell if it was a teen, adult, or child. They only caught intermittent sounds, like arguing but not loud enough to make out words. A few other homes said they heard a car door close in the night, but in a residential area, someone driving late wasn't unusual. Every house police knocked on opened a slightly different account, a vague memory fragment, an uncertain noise. Some said hurried footsteps, others swore almost nothing but wind through backyards. One even thought they heard dogs barking near the creek, but unsure if at a stranger or just a garden cat. Police noted every detail, but the more they heard, the more each story felt like a note in a chaotic symphony. None fit perfectly, none strong enough for a main lead. Same time frame, but each person told a completely different slice. Some said the noise came from the east, near the field and school lot. Others insisted from the creek near dense trees. One described it like rocks rolling or someone stepping into bushes, but admitted strong night wind could distort sounds. A notable detail was many mentioning the trail area darker than usual. The night Evan vanished, since a nearby streetlight had been out for days. Still, not special, as the area's lighting often glitched in seasonal changes. Police returned to Duck Creek Greenbelt several times that morning, each time trying to match statements to terrain. But everything remained disjointed. No witness saw Evan meet anyone, no one recalled screams, no one spotted clear movement, all just scattered night sounds, and in a quiet area like Garland, hard to distinguish normal night noise from something else. Evan's family followed close behind police, trying to suppress fear to hear each account, but those muddled stories only made them feel more helpless. They wanted to believe someone accidentally saw something important without realizing, but the more they asked, the vaguer it got. When police finished the first neighborhood interview round, they reviewed all notes, dozens of info bits, but none matched. The night Evan vanished had footsteps, soft talking, cars, impacts, something near the creek, but all like dark fragments impossible to piece into a clear shape. The only thing certain after that long morning was Evan had entered that path, and from that moment, no one knew what happened to him anymore. When police completed the first neighborhood interview round and realized those scattered accounts couldn't help determine the next direction, they returned to Evan's house to ask more about his normal habits, hoping for a small detail to aid reconstructing his final journey, the night he vanished. That's when Evan's mom, in the utter disarray of someone who'd been awake nearly 2 nights, suddenly remembered something she initially thought unimportant. The night Evan didn't come home, the family landline rang very briefly, just 1 or 2 rings, then stopped, and when she picked up, she only heard light static like the line shaking in wind, then silence. She thought she'd imagined it, or it was a wrong number. But now, as police tried piecing a still completely dark picture, that detail became something to examine carefully. An officer immediately requested call logs from the phone company, since in 1990, all home calls were manually logged, though not as detailed as modern systems. That afternoon, a Southwestern Bell rep brought the Ramsey family's printed call log. In the dense list of familiar numbers and routine local calls, one line made the small living room fall dead silent, an extremely short call, under 3 seconds, from a payphone at the old gas station on the corner of Broadway Boulevard. The call time matched when Evan might have been on the stretch between school and Duck Creek, falling into the window. Police thought he entered the creek area. Police immediately left the house to check the payphone, though nearly a day after Evan's disappearance, the payphone still worked, with foggy glass dust-covered and faded ad signs hanging beside it. At a glance, Nothing special, an old booth, slightly tangled cord, metal number plate worn by time. But to police, Evan possibly standing there, just minutes' walk from the trail considered his way home, felt like the first real trace. From the phone company, they learned that brief call was captured by the Ramsey's automatic answering system, and if lucky, the audio segment still existed on the machine. Back at Evan's house, they immediately rewound the tape, just an extremely short sound sequence, but enough to freeze everyone in the room. First, light wind, like blowing through a small gap near the mic, then a vague sound, unclear if footsteps or something lightly touching ground. Then right before the signal abruptly cut, something like hurried breathing or an interrupted phrase, not clear words, not clear if child, teen or adult, all in a flash, but it carried a sense something happened right then. At the moment, Evan tried calling home. Police played the tape multiple times. Each replay, those vague sounds seemed to carry a weight no one could put into words, like something intruded that moment, not clear enough to be sure, but not faint enough to ignore. An officer tried mapping the payphone position, marking the view toward Duck Creek. Distance from payphone to trail wasn't far, enough for Evan to stop and call, if feeling uneasy, or if something made him want family contact. But maybe he just stopped to say he'd be late. Every possibility, vague, no way to confirm. When they returned to the payphone scene a second time that afternoon, sunlight slanted through old awnings, making the booth look even more isolated in the empty lot. No security cameras, no witnesses seeing Evan there, no clear traces of what happened right after the call. Even the night shift gas station clerk said he didn't recall anyone using the booth, as that night had few customers, and he was busy inventorying. The only thing police had solid, a call, very short from a spot on Evan's route, and if Evan made it, what kept him from finishing a sentence? What cut the call so suddenly? No one had answers. The payphone call explained nothing specific, but it opened the first clue police could grasp, a small light in the vast dark of the disappearance. It confirmed Evan tried contacting, that he was somewhere between school and Duck Creek at that mysterious time, and more importantly, it raised a question searchers couldn't avoid: what happened right before the phone line cut? Those winds, vague sounds, hurried breath, and final silence, all just stretched the unease already enveloping the case. That call answered nothing, but it proved one thing everyone feared facing Evan had tried reaching toward family before vanishing completely. The next morning, as sunlight began casting the first bright squares through the tree branches, police returned to Duck Creek in an effort to expand the search scope. The air in this area still carried an unusual quiet. The creek flowed silently, the water surface reflecting faint light, and dew-wet leaves stuck flat to the ground. But what brought them back wasn't just the geography, it was the persistent feeling that the answer, or at least a small part of it, lay somewhere among the bushes, damp soil patches, and winding trails of Duck Creek. The search party lined up from the trailhead, where Evan was believed to have turned in, then gradually moved deeper inside, more cautiously than the first time. A young officer stopped before a soft soil section, right by the creek bank, and called others over to observe. There, on the soil still holding dew marks, was a stretch that looked dragged. Not long, but enough for experienced eyes to spot the anomaly. Not a large animal track, not tire marks, it resembled something heavy scraping across the ground, then vanishing into the thicket. A few steps from that spot, another officer pointed down to a slightly depressed area, shaped almost like a footprint, but not clear enough to determine size or direction. It was faint to the point that without close inspection, it just looked like a minor weather-induced dip, but placed next to that drag mark, the picture started showing lines that didn't fit normality. No one dared conclude, but everyone felt this spot needed further checking. They bent close to the ground, using sticks to gently push aside dry branches and decayed leaves. One officer discovered the entire fallen leaf layer on this dirt path section had been disturbed in a very strange way, not wind-directed, not natural animal movement. It looked like someone had stepped over multiple times or something had been placed down then lifted in haste. When expanding the search radius a few more feet, someone suddenly stopped and picked up something tiny with 2 fingers. It was a very small fabric piece, size of half a finger joint, caught on the edge of a low branch. Its color, a dark blue or black depending on light angle, didn't match any natural vegetation at Duck Creek. It was torn unevenly, frayed edges, as if once stretched or strongly impacted. No one in the group made hasty guesses. They carefully placed it in a plastic bag, noted the position, then continued observing the surrounding area. A few minutes later, while checking nearby bushes, another detail caught attention on several sparse branches right at the trail edge. A few leaves were brushed sideways horizontally, not wind or gravity direction. All these, the offset drag mark, faint footprint, disturbed leaves, small fabric piece, individually uncertain, but together in such a small area, made the group pause longer than usual. The creek still flowed, and the water sound breaking the silence made the whole scene even more ambiguous. No clear sign Evan had been here, but nothing proved he hadn't passed this spot. The only thing they had was an unavoidable feeling. Something had happened in this area, very close to when Evan vanished. As they paused to compile notes and sketch the ground diagram, one officer stood apart looking along the trail. From his position, the dirt path could be seen extending toward branches into residential areas, then continuing into deeper tree shadows. The whole area looked normal to the point of disbelief, but that very normality made every small detail stand out more. No clear struggle traces, no abandoned items, no direct evidence Evan passed here, but the ground, with its blurry marks and unnatural small fabric, didn't fully deny it. When the search party left Duck Creek after the long morning, everyone carried the same feeling. They'd found something first, but not enough to understand what really happened. The small fabric piece, the disturbed soil and leaf traces, and the unusually silent creek bank space only deepened the biggest question: where did Evan go, and what happened right after he turned onto this path the night he vanished? When attention returned to the Duck Creek area for the third time in 2 days, police started realizing the vague ground traces couldn't be all the night left behind. The trail's silence, disturbed leaves, and strange fabric only provided a picture of something happening here, but said nothing about who or why. That's why officers continued expanding interviews to houses surrounding both ends of Duck Creek, hoping someone accidentally saw something they couldn't yet fit into the story. And then, as if a link suddenly lit up, a small detail started repeating in multiple statements. The previous night, near the trail into the creek area, someone saw a brown car parked nearby. The first to mention the car was a man living right by the dirt road down to Duck Creek. He said when going to the backyard to close the dog kennel around before midnight, he saw a dark-colored car parked in the empty lot near the trees, where usually no one stopped more than a few minutes. He couldn't clearly see what car, just remembered it had a long shape, low body, older style than new sedans then. He heard no engine running, saw no one by the car, and since it was dark, he didn't pay more. He just thought maybe a neighbor stopping to call from the payphone, or someone resting after the school event. At the next house, a young woman also remembered seeing metal reflected light from a brown car parked near the trees, but she insisted she didn't see anyone inside. She was taking her small dog to the front yard, and all she remembered was a car silhouette standing still, no lights on, no movement. She said the car looked like it'd been there a while, because when she opened the door to step out, it was already there, and when she went back inside, it hadn't changed position. She couldn't describe the brand clearly, but was sure the color was somewhat dull, like brown mixed with copper under weak streetlights. When police reached the two houses opposite the Duck Creek entrance, an older couple said they didn't see anyone pass or hear footsteps, but they remembered a dark car moving slowly along the main road, then stopping a bit near the empty lot before turning off headlights. The husband thought this car didn't look like usual neighborhood ones, because its shape was squarer, like late 80s models. When asked if he remembered license plate or other features, he shook his head. Too far, too dark, couldn't see clearly. Another family, south of the trail, said they didn't see anything but heard a car driving slowly through that stretch, then stopping completely. The husband said he thought someone was trying to find an address or waiting, because the engine sound was low but steady, not revving hard or sharp braking. However, when he opened the door to look, the car was off, lying still in the dark. Finally, a college student renting near the trail, who drove home late after classes, he said when passing that stretch, he saw a brown car parked close to the road edge, but with the street light out, he couldn't see inside. He just remembered the car shape with long roof and short tail like old sedans, and what caught his attention was no dome light or any illumination, as if the person inside intentionally avoided notice. When police laid all those statements on the table, they realized this was the first time since Evan's disappearance a specific detail was repeatedly mentioned by many. The brown car. The common points in statements were clear: the car's position usually near the trail, around late evening to after midnight, and no one saw the car leave or people exiting. But here, ambiguity crept in. Each remembered slightly differently. Some sure dark brown, others like copper sheen. Some described square shape, others long. Some thought it'd been there long, others it just arrived. And above all, no one saw license plate, no one remembered features clear enough to narrow search. So though the brown car became the first repeating clue police got since the case start, it was still just a still silhouette in the night, lacking any details to identify owner or reason for appearing near where Evan was believed to have turned in. Additionally, occasional strange cars at night in residential areas wasn't unusual, making assessing the car's importance even harder. When interviews ended, searchers gathered, noted all accounts, and once more looked toward Duck Creek with a mix of hope and confusion. They had no evidence the brown car related to Evan's disappearance, but couldn't rule it out. It appeared at the right time, right spot, and stood still where a 17-year-old had passed right before vanishing. The car clue didn't solve anything, but became the first piece police could hold, a faint image in Garland's dark night, a hanging question without answer: who sat in the brown car parked near Duck Creek the night Evan vanished, and what did they see that no one else did? When officers returned to Garland PD headquarters to compile all statements about the brown car, an idea was raised. If many mentioned a strange car appearing on the stretch near Duck Creek, then traffic cameras at nearby intersections, though old and limited in quality, might have accidentally captured any vehicle passing the area at Evan's disappearance time. Cameras in 1990 weren't designed for plate or face recognition, but they still recorded blurry image sequences, mainly for monitoring traffic flow on main roads, so a team of investigators was sent to the city traffic management office to review all tape recorded in the suspect time frame. They didn't expect much. Old cameras often had image noise, sometimes only storing a few scattered frames every few minutes. Yet in those blurry frames, an unexpected detail appeared. At the intersection of Walnut Street and the turn into the northern residential area by Duck Creek, a camera on a utility pole captured a few seconds of footage from the night Evan vanished. Among familiar neighborhood cars, common sedans, a few Texas-style pickups, there was a red light streaking through the frame, unclear, but enough to recognize it wasn't the brown car many witnesses mentioned. That light, from the camera angle, only showed as a stretched bright streak, slowly drifting across the frame, then disappearing as the car turned toward the small road to Duck Creek. Image quality was so poor officers had to rewind multiple times to confirm that streak was a headlight from a red car, or one with paint reflecting streetlights in a way making it look red. Notably, this streak's appearance time nearly matched when residents reported seeing the brown car parked near the trail, creating a sense of two different vehicles present around the same area in the same time frame. Police circled the map, marking each camera position and estimating the red car's possible path before entering the frame. If it came from South Garland, it could have driven right through the stretch to Duck Creek. If from the north, it might have circled the residential area, stopped, or turned into the trail zone, where Evan was believed to have passed. But since the camera only captured a short segment, they couldn't determine speed or next direction. When bringing the footage back for other officers to view, everyone had the same feeling: the red car opened a completely different direction, a possibility not considered in resident interviews. No witness mentioned a red car, no one heard engine from such a standout color vehicle, but the camera recorded it moving right near the area, and right near the night's most critical time. The second car's appearance put the investigation team in a bind. They'd already struggled with vague brown car info, now facing the question, was the red car related to Evans' disappearance, or just coincidentally passing at that exact time? Without enough info, neither hypothesis could be ruled out. Tracing the red car wasn't easier than the brown. Color couldn't be confirmed exactly. Camera too far for vehicle shape ID. Red cars weren't rare in 1990. Garland from sport coupes to cheap hatchbacks, making narrowing like searching for a lost key in a vast lawn. Police returned to areas around Walnut Street to ask residents if anyone saw a red car pass that night. But again, answers like mismatched pieces. Some said they remembered red light late at night, but unsure if car neon sign or reflection from a corner convenience store. Another said saw a fast-moving car but didn't recall color. Most residents there said they slept early or heard no car sounds around Evans' suspected disappearance time. When noting all statements, police placed the two clues side by side, the brown car still unmoving, in many testimonies, and the red car unseen by anyone but captured by camera in a key moment. One a static shadow, the other a dynamic light streak. One from neighborhood accounts, one from the camera's impartial eye. Both couldn't be ignored, but neither strong enough for main lead. And that started the first split in investigation direction. Maybe the brown car was the real clue, since it appeared right where Evan passed, but maybe the red car was the key, as the only one with visual evidence, though faint. Police had to split teams. One continued tracing the brown car based on community statements. The other tried reconstructing the red car's path from scant camera data. No one knew which was right, which wrong. But they all understood the second car's appearance, along with mismatched statements, was doubling the difficulty in solving Evans' disappearance. If the brown car was the night's mystery, the red car was the unseen streaking shadow, and between those two images was an unfillable void, the void where Evan Cole Ramsey had vanished. As the two clues about the brown car and the red car began pushing the investigation in different directions, police were forced to take the next step in any disappearance, with unusual elements, circling potential related individuals, even indirectly. No one wanted to use suspect too early, but to avoid missing key possibilities, they needed an initial list, including anyone appearing within Evans' movement radius, the night he vanished. The first list was built simply, based on what they had: owners of vehicles with colors matching those seen or recorded, some men living near Duck Creek, and a few names emerging when residents mentioned unfamiliar faces appearing in the area recently. The clearest starting point was brown car owners within Duck Creek's range. Garland PD quickly scanned DMV records and identified a few area owners, but this was 1990 data systems scattered, info not always accurate, and many old cars possibly resold without papers. Among the names, a middle-aged man living a few blocks from the trail, a young guy working late at a nearby restaurant, and an old brown pickup owner neighbors said they weren't sure still ran. When questioned, each had different explanations for their schedule the night Evan vanished. One said watching TV at home, another claimed out for a few minutes, but couldn't recall exact time. Some seemed surprised to be asked, others confused as if unsure where they were then. Police noted every answer, but the initial feeling wasn't guilt, but uncertainty. A familiar inconsistency in nighttime incidents when people don't track time. Larger than the brown car owners list was the group residents had called suspicious. Someone mentioned for walking an unfamiliar road at night, but turned out just new to the area. A homeless man once sleeping under a convenience store awning near the trail, but when police found him, he insisted that night he slept at a temporary camp, miles from Duck Creek. Accounts about him from others were scattered. Some said saw him near the creek area days before. Others said hadn't seen him recently. In another case, a local teen who'd had a minor conflict with Evan at school months earlier, typical student stuff, was mentioned. Police had to interview him, and he said that night he was at a friend's watching a game, with many witnesses. Though his statement sounded reasonable, investigators couldn't immediately rule anyone out based on feeling. But notably, cross-checking area statements made one thing increasingly clear: no accounts matched. Some said a car driving slow, others swore the area completely quiet. Some heard noise, but didn't know from where. Others heard nothing but flowing water. A woman said she was sure she saw a brown car parked in the dark, while the man living right across swore no car appeared near his house that night. The persons to verify list grew with each interview, but became foggier. In at least 3 cases, contradictory statements forced police to re-ask if they mixed up time or day. A middle-aged woman initially claimed seeing a dark car pass, but in the second interview, wasn't sure if brown or black, and even unsure if Evan's disappearance night or another that week. An older area man also changed. First said heard light breaking near the creek bank, but when re-asked, said it might be a neighbor's door slamming hard. This inaccuracy wasn't intentional, but human memory's nature, especially vague nighttime memories. However, for police, those contradictions made circling even harder. No witness confident enough to say they saw a stranger or suspicious activity. No one recalled clear plates. No one identified anyone near the trail. No one even sure which direction sounds came from. Result: the initial verification list, not yet suspects, included some area vehicle owners with described matching colors, a few men near Duck Creek, named in neighbor accounts, and a few strange faces appearing around the area in recent weeks. Everyone on the list could be involved, or completely innocent. As afternoon faded, police sat in the small meeting room, laying all notes on the table. They had a brown car mentioned by many, a red car in camera footage, a few people present in the area the night Evan vanished, and countless mismatched accounts. But though the list longer, the picture no clearer. In the investigation's early days, the only thing they had was a troubling reality. More people and vehicles appeared near Duck Creek than anyone thought, and amid all that movement, no one knew who last saw Evan Cole Ramsey before he vanished into Garland's darkness. Nearly 2 months since the night Evan vanished, Garland gradually shifted from fall to early winter, as cold began seeping through streets, and all traces of homecoming evenings faded from residents' memories. Evan's disappearance was still mentioned, but like many prolonged cases, it became a silent obsession in the family, and an unanswered question for police. Focused searches grew sparser, new interviews brought no breakthroughs, and though brown and red car clues opened 2 different investigation paths, neither strong enough for clear results. Then, on a gloomy December morning, as thick fog still covered land strips along Rolett Creek, police received the call they'd both hoped for and dreaded. A group of hikers discovered a body lying in a low forest section along the creek bank, miles southeast of Duck Creek. The reporter described the body as no longer intact and very hard to identify, wedged between 2 thick bushes in a rarely visited spot. When officers arrived, the heavy atmosphere weighed on every step. The Rolett Creek area that winter morning looked both peaceful and eerie: cold water surface, bare trees, damp soil sticking to shoes creating unease. In that low tangled ground, under fallen branches like withered arms, the body was found. Though simply covered by a tarp, everyone understood they were about to face what no one in the city wanted to think about. When the tarp was lifted, no doubt based on height, body structure, and a few identifiable features, it was very likely Evan Cole Ramsey. A forensic doctor on scene needed just minutes to confirm it was a young man Evan's age, and what weighed heaviest was the body's condition. No outer clothing, only thin underwear and part of underpants, the rest seemingly long gone. 2 months outdoors heavily affected the body environmentally, but enough remained to show the clearest sign: a fatal head wound, small bullet hole indicating close-range shooting. That harsh truth silenced witnesses. In that moment, the slim hope Evan was alive vanished completely. As police sealed the scene, every small detail was recorded: body position, lying direction, distance to water edge, surrounding traces. The access road to this area was completely far from the trail where Evan was last seen nearby, and no one understood how the body ended up in such a remote, hard-to-reach place. This led officers to conclude almost immediately, this wasn't where Evan died. The body had been moved. Basic on-site examination confirmed the bullet wound as primary cause of death. Small straight entry hole at the back of the head, showing the victim wasn't facing the attacker at the time. Though no specific ballistics yet, experienced forensics noted likely a short weapon, possibly .38 or 357, common types then. No shell casings at scene, no clear struggle signs, and ground around the body mostly weather affected without recent activity signs. All reinforced the theory the body was brought here after Evan died elsewhere. Officers also noted no outer clothing, and though possibly partly due to wildlife or environment, complete absence of attire was unusual. Evan's jacket, jeans, tennis shoes, and personal items didn't appear anywhere in the area. Not scattered around, not caught on branches, no sign they'd existed nearby. This made determining the attack location much harder. As the body was removed from the area, the air grew so quiet dry leaves falling to the ground could be heard. One veteran Garland PD officer silently stood watching the trees, stretching along Rolett Creek, as if seeking answers in that still landscape. He knew the moment they found the body was the investigation's turning point. From here, the case shifted from missing to murder. News of Evan's discovery quickly spread via local radio, and area families received info shortly after. When Evan's mom arrived at the police office for official confirmation, she could say nothing but choked sobs. The hope, though fragile, had lingered until today, and now it dissipated like cold smoke. Police filed temporary report, victim shot close range, body moved, outer clothing missing, all signs of intentional attack, but the most puzzling and frightening was why move the body so far? Why choose Rolett Creek, miles from Evan's disappearance site, with complex hard-to-access terrain? Calculated act or opportunity? No one knew the answer, and no one said it aloud, but everyone understood the moment Evan's body was found. The question was no longer where did Evan go, but who brought him here, and why? And from that second, the investigation entered a completely new phase, heavier, more unpredictable, and gloomier than anyone could imagine when the disappearance began. As soon as Evan's body was removed from Rolett Creek, and the forensics team began preliminary examination at the county lab, a conclusion was reached almost immediately. A conclusion no one wanted to hear but couldn't deny: the discovery site wasn't where Evan died. Body signs, adhering soil, wound, and lying position completely mismatched Rolett Creek terrain. The body had no mud from the nearby shallow water, no drag marks, no impact injuries from rocks or trunks as seen when victims die at the site. Most importantly, the close-range gunshot wound style didn't fit the site's natural circumstances. Examiners needed just hours to agree Evan was attacked elsewhere, then brought to Rolett Creek, at a time the attacker thought the body would be hard to find. This wasn't disorganized or impulsive. It bore signs of someone knowing the area well, and choosing a low-traffic spot. Forensics noted the victim's body wasn't in a natural fall position, it was placed without chaos. No extended drag from water edge to body position, no slide paths, no clear nearby footprints proving manual movement. The whole area seemed like where the body was left quietly, not the attack site. This led to a near-certain hypothesis: the body was transported by vehicle. Rolett Creek terrain too dense for carrying a body deep into low forest by hand at night without traces. Thick branches, low ground, small slopes by the creek bank created obstacles, but a car parked near the forest entrance, then someone dragging or carrying the body a few dozen yards to place it, was far more feasible. Police returned to the scene that same day to reassess the entire area from the vehicle body transport hypothesis view. They searched for tire tracks, but rough terrain plus dry leaf cover everywhere made identifying old tire marks nearly impossible. Still, one thing clear, though no clear tire signs: the dirt road in from Rolett Road's main section had open space large enough for a sedan or coupe to park without much notice. Officers stood at that clearing, observing the thick trees separating road and body position, then quietly discussed. Distance between points not too far, enough for someone to quickly bring the body into low forest, then leave unseen if nighttime. No one said it aloud, but all understood the case had shifted levels. If the body was moved, the perpetrator had means and time to do so. This meant the subject not only had opportunity, but calculation. Taking the body miles from where Evan was last seen, hiding in hard-to-access Rolett Creek, wasn't impulsive but chosen. An officer by the water edge, watching trees reflect on the calm creek surface, quietly said, "If not for hikers accidentally passing that day, the body might have lain there through winter, spring, even longer." A chilling but completely accurate observation. In the emergency meeting right after, the investigation team mapped the route from Duck Creek to Rolett Creek, marking all paths, turns, possible temporary parking lots, and common empty road sections. Discussions focused on one core question: how was Evan's body brought from the disappearance site here? Two possibilities: either the subject knew local trails and shortcuts around Garland very well, or drove a loop from main routes to drop the body. Both frightening, but the second made the meeting room fall silent. It meant clear intent to dispose. This immediately forced police to re-examine the two car clues, the brown car and the red car. No one rushed to conclude, but the body transported by vehicle hypothesis made these two vehicles, though vague uncertain, far more important. Travel speed between Duck Creek and Rolett Creek, the night Evan vanished, was also considered. If the body was taken to Rolett Creek in the first hours, it meant the subject acted fast, moved fast, and knew exactly where to place the body undetected. If the move happened days after Evan vanished, the question shifted: what kept the body from being spotted by passers-by, fishermen, or hunters all that time? Whatever the answer, it forced everyone to step back and re-evaluate the entire case from the start. No longer just a teen walking home, vanishing on a dark trail. No longer just a interrupted payphone call story. No longer just two cars appearing in the area that fateful night. All now connected in a terrifying hypothesis: somewhere, someone took Evan from Garland the night he vanished, leaving no traces, no explanation, just a body lying silent at Rolett Creek. And from the moment forensics confirmed secondary scene, the case was no longer just finding Evan. Now the investigation's sole goal was finding where he died, and who took him from there. After forensics confirmed Rolett Creek was only a secondary scene, and Evan's body was moved by vehicle, the atmosphere in Garland PD's meeting room changed noticeably. The two seemingly vague car clues from the night Evan vanished suddenly became heavier, more suggestive than any prior info. And of the two, the brown car mentioned by most witnesses was seen as the more accessible investigation direction. In efforts to trace info, police requested DMV detailed data on all late 80s brown sedans registered in Garland and bordering areas. When data arrived, one statistic made all officers pause: the number of brown Caprices within a few miles of Duck Creek was truly very few. This model was more common early 80s, but by 1990, it had become outdated, heavy, rare. Most owners had resold, traded, or sent to scrapyards. But in the DMV list, exactly 3 brown Caprices were registered in the area the year Evan vanished. This police couldn't ignore. Of the 3 owners, 2 were easily verified. One, an older man, South Garland, whose Caprice hadn't run for months, tarped in garage, flat tires, dead battery, clearly unusable. The other, a small business owner in Richardson, his Caprice used for light hauling, and never left the warehouse area the night Evan vanished, verified by night shift employees. But the third, the remaining brown Caprice, belonged to a man named Hal Brenner, living not far from Duck Creek and closer than anyone else on the list. When this name appeared, the meeting room fell silent. Not because anything unusual in Hal's record, actually, his record quite normal, but because his car perfectly matched witness descriptions: dull brown, long-shape, old model, often parked in the front yard in a residential area just streets from the trail. Police decided to meet Hal for verification. When they knocked, Hal appeared quite calm, almost wondering why police at his house. He was nearing 40, tall but unremarkable, living with ex-wife and young son in an old brick house. The brown Caprice was parked there, exactly as witnesses described: paint slightly faded, long body, square roof, late 80s style. When asked about the night Evan vanished, Hal said he was home all evening, and this was confirmed by his ex-wife. She said Hal was home, watching TV and cleaning garage stuff all that night. Police noted the statements, but what puzzled them wasn't the statements, but the unclear feeling about them, a feeling any experienced investigator knows. Hal's ex-wife provided the alibi, but it was from one person only. No neighbors confirmed seeing Hal home that night. No receipts, no time-stamped calls, no activity for absolute verification, but no evidence he left home either. An alibi like that sat on the thin line between could be true and can't prove. Police continued gentle questioning, asking if Hal ever drove near Duck Creek or Walnut Street that night. Hal said no, and noted his Caprice rarely driven at night, due to age, weak headlights. He answered calmly, not flustered, not overly defensive, but that very calm made the investigator hard to read true emotions. An officer observed the Caprice from the yard, thick dust on the hood, but not enough to determine if driven days prior. A small detail noted, left front tire newer than the others. No one concluded, but logged for later check. Back at the office, police cross-checked resident statements about the brown car with Hal's claim of being home. The statements already vague on timing, making comparison a math problem, without fixed numbers. One witness said saw car near midnight, another heard low engine, but no one exact time sure. Meanwhile, Hal said he never left home, no evidence disproving, but nothing absolutely confirming. After putting data on the board, the investigation team broke the brown car clue into possibilities. One, witnesses might misremember time or the car seen wasn't Hal's Caprice. 2, the brown car could be someone else's entirely, and just coincidentally appeared at the right time. 3, Hal could be telling the truth he was home. 4, Hal could still have left home briefly, and returned before anyone noticed. No officer liked the fourth possibility, but none could ignore it. What concerned them more, if Evan's body was moved by vehicle, an old sedan like a Caprice was fully capable of carrying a body, miles away. Nothing in the car's structure made this unlikely, but no one on the team dared jump to that conclusion, just because Hal owned a matching car. Focusing on Hal was only initial step, logical from data not personal suspicion. So police continued asking neighbors around Hal's house. Results didn't clarify. Some said saw the Caprice parked there all evening, others didn't remember. Some said, might have seen car lights on a bit, but then admitted not sure if that night, or another. All statements continued falling into the familiar loop of vagueness. When the end-of-day meeting happened, the lead investigator concluded, Hal Brenner wasn't a suspect, but his Caprice was a clue that couldn't be ignored. That clue needed following, not for clear guilt, but as the rare piece in the maze of confused details. Also in that meeting, a question was raised. If the Caprice wasn't involved, then who owned the brown car residents saw the night Evan vanished? And if the Caprice was involved, was the alibi from Hal's ex-wife truly reliable, or just what she thought was true at the time? No answers, only one single clue, of 3 brown Caprices in Garland 1990, 2 eliminated. The remaining, Hal Brenners, stood alone in the investigation's murky zone, not enough to charge, but too coincidental to not examine closely. From here, police knew they had to return to 2 questions: which car appeared near Duck Creek, and who was really driving it that fateful night. But what they didn't know was these questions would drag on for many more years, even decades before a real answer. As every effort focused on Hal Brenner's brown Caprice yielded no clear breakthrough, the mood in the investigation team began to sink. DMV data too sparse, resident statements too vague, no physical evidence directly linking Hal to the night Evan vanished, and worse, no other clues to open a new investigation branch. The red car from the blurry traffic camera helped nothing more, images too noisy to identify make plate completely unreadable, and no one remembered seeing a strange red car in the residential area that evening. The 2 main investigation directions, the brown car and the red car, gradually became 2 untouchable shadows, and then the investigation stalled, not because police wanted it, but because every door slammed shut at once. In the following weeks, the team returned to Duck Creek and Rowlett Creek multiple times, trying to find overlooked details, but all they discovered were faint traces of time, disturbed soil hardened, dry leaves fallen thick, and any potential traces long erased by wind, rain, and animals. They tried scanning abandoned parking lots, repair shops, scrapyards, to see if any caprice matching the description was dumped or repaired near Evans' disappearance time, but no one recorded standout vehicles. Small garages couldn't recall old cars they'd taken in or fixed those days. Many records so brief, nothing traceable. The first year after the case, the file stayed open constantly, but entering the second year, things started changing. New cases arose, resources dispersed, and Evans' file, though never forgotten, no longer sat on the morning meeting table like before. Investigators who'd invested heavy time were reassigned to other units, or handled more urgent matters. Dense notes on roads, soil traces, brown car, red car, alibis, payphone, gradually became yellowed pages in an old steel cabinet at the hall's end. Evans' family still called monthly, sometimes weekly, asking for updates, and police answers always the same: "We're still looking," but nothing to look at. Every effort led to dead ends. In following years, sporadic tips still emerged. Someone said once saw a strange young man near Duck Creek. Another reported seeing an old sedan driving slow in the area days after the disappearance. But when police asked, they weren't sure of timing, unsure if Evans' disappearance week. Some confused with other neighborhood events then. The more investigated, the more info intertwined, making the picture chaotic. Police also re-examined the initial list: vehicle owners, trail nearby residents, minor record individuals, but nothing changed. None matched physical traces, none suspicious enough for search warrant, none suddenly left Garland, or showed unusual signs post-case. And then the case gradually drifted into time's shadows. From year 3 to 5, case review mainly happened when new investigators assigned and needed file scan. Each wrote nearly identical notes: insufficient evidence, no new witnesses, no related physical evidence, no solid investigation direction. Gradually, Evan Cole Ramsey's case joined Garland's unsolved disappearances, then murders, list, long enough to choke any young officer reading first time. Years 6, 7, then 10 passed in near absolute silence. Only Evans' family, and a few veteran officers, still wondered, did they miss something? Was the brown Caprice truly innocent, or just lacking evidence to probe deeper? Did the camera red car mean anything, or just coincidental pass? Did anyone in the neighborhood hear or see something they never dared say? Those questions lay dormant in the file over a decade, unanswered, and the case, like hundreds others, got covered in thick time dust. But in that silence, one thing unchanged: Evan Cole Ramsey's name never vanished from Garland PD memory. Because though everything cooled, this case wasn't just a file, it was an unanswered void, a hanging question mark through decades. A 17-year-old lost where no one thought danger could hide. No one knew it would take many more years, investigation tech changes, and chance events for the case to reopen. But at that point, after over a decade stalled, the only certainty: Evan Cole Ramsey's case had officially become a cold case. A frozen case, buried deep in Garland's darkness for a long time, unknown if ever solved. 34 years after Evan Cole Ramsey vanished from the dark trail by Duck Creek, the case file still sat in the old steel cabinet at Garland Police Department's hall end, thickening over time, not from new clues, but endless investigation reports from generations of officers come and gone. But in 2024, when Garland PD formed the new cold case unit to review decades unsolved cases, Evans' name appeared almost immediately on the revisit list. The first thing catching the new unit's attention wasn't any once key clue detail, but the overall 3-decade deadlock: a teen disappearing walking home, interrupted payphone call, 2 area-appearing cars, no one clearly remembered, body moved miles, no strong physical trace to a suspect. All that, plus long directionless time, made Evans' case a prime cold case for the unit to start. Reopening followed protocol: old paper boxes pulled from shelves, each yellowed document bundle opened, each faded ink handwritten note rescanned. But most important, what every cold investigation awaits: the original 1990 evidence bag, items seized at Duck Creek, Rolett Creek, and related initial search areas. That evidence bag, resealed multiple times over years, lay deep in the metal storage among hundreds others. When the archivist brought it out, old seal tapes discolored, and 1990 investigators scrawled hard-to-read notes still on the label. Inside the bag, a few once deemed insufficient for deep analysis, a small dark blue fabric piece found at Duck Creek soil samples, some comparison-collected items quickly dropped from investigation, and especially a nylon bag containing the carefully folded fabric. In 1990, forensics very limited. Things like tiny fabric fibers or micro-traces hardly analyzable in detail, and DNA tech then only useful in clean, uncontaminated, undegraded samples. The bag's fabric once seen as insignificant detail, but 2024 completely different. When Cold Case Unit opened that evidence bag, first catching attention the dark blue fabric, though small, it retained the frayed shape 1990 officers noted. An investigator lifted it under strong light, gently rotated, then set on the stainless table. He saw nothing different beyond a few offset fibers, but he knew well sometimes once meaningless things become keys with tech progress. So the team decided to reanalyze the fabric under modern microscope. As the technicians sat before the screen, they magnified each fiber, scanning the fine dust layer time-sealed. For nearly 2 hours, they saw only expected dust fibers, tiny rough soil and sand bits. But then, rotating the fabric another angle, a technician paused and leaned close to the screen. Something caught on the fiber edge, tiny, almost invisible to naked eye, a thin strand darker, nearly black in direct light, but brown when side-lit. The technician tilted head, adjusted focus, then whispered to the investigator behind, "Looks like this is a hair." The investigator stepped closer, looked at the screen, felt his heart beat harder. They magnified again, and as the technician said, it was a hair fragment, extremely small, just a few millimeters, but human hair. It had been trapped in the fabric for 3 decades unknown. In 1990, this hair too small for then tech to isolate or analyze. But in 2024, everything changed. Finding this tiny hair wasn't mere chance, it was the first physical evidence potentially identifying someone besides Evan, directly contacting the fabric, and possibly the scene. As they extracted the hair from the fabric bag with specialized tools, every motion slow, as if any small error could ruin the sole chance sought over 3 decades. In the lab, silence enveloped. A few veteran officers standing behind, who joined 90's investigation, couldn't hide emotions watching the hair placed in a specialized tube. To them, this wasn't just evidence, it was hope lost for years. One whispered, "If we'd found this back then, everything might be different." But all understood time can't reverse. All they could do was let present tech fill past gaps. As the hair was prepared for DNA analysis, the lead investigator decided something crucial: pull all files on the brown Caprice, the camera-recorded red car, and everyone once on the initial list. Because if DNA from this hair matched any of them, or anyone unconsidered, the entire investigation direction would pivot. That evening, in the Cold Case Unit's small meeting room, under yellow light and high-stacked documents on the table, no one spoke of coincidence. They knew too well, 34 years later, a hair accidentally trapped in fabric wasn't random. It was a message from the past, strangely preserved by time, as if Evan's case never surrendered to darkness. And as the hair was sealed in the tube and sent to Austin's modern DNA lab, everyone understood that moment marked a new milestone. The first time in decades, the case had a chance to move forward. No one dared say it, but in their minds one thought, if this hair has its own story, it's about to be revealed, and that could change the entire Evan Cole Ramsey case. When the hair was sealed and transferred to DPS Austin's DNA lab, the Cold Case Unit could hardly take eyes off the internal system progress screen. For over 3 decades, Evan Cole Ramsey's case had no strong physical trace to rely on. Every clue: vague brown car, no one sure, red car from camera, unclear shape, payphone, no voice saved, witness statements scattered. And now, a hair smaller than half a rice grain became their sole hope. DPS Austin reported the testing process could take weeks, especially with such a small sample preserved over 30 years. The hair had no root, meaning traditional DNA unusable, but 2024 advanced tech allowed mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA extraction from the shaft itself, though results weaker than nuclear DNA. Still, for a cold case, any info could crack the sealed door. Waiting days passed in quiet tension. The lead investigator still flipped old file pages, trying to find hair-related details, but nothing. 1990 notes only described the fabric, no hair mention. Clearly then, they didn't know it existed. A strange luck, or past oversight, accidentally becoming present opportunity. When the Austin lab email appeared on screen one cold early month morning, no one in the room breathed for the first seconds. The lead opened the email, read each line slowly, others standing behind holding breath. The report stated clearly, mtDNA analysis, results from hair sample in Evan Ramsey case evidence show complete match with comparison sample in system. Individual, Harold Hall Brenner. Everyone stood still, no one spoke, no one needed to ask what it meant. Hal Brenner's name, appearing early investigation, seen as mere Caprice Brown coincidence, alibied, then faded from files, now returned with entirely different weight. DNA isn't vague account. DNA doesn't rely on faulty memory. DNA doesn't confuse dates or car colors. DNA is data, and the data said the hair trapped in the fabric found at Duck Creek 1990, directly linked to Harold Brenner. Half the meeting room sank in stunned shock, the other half surged with years of deadlock released. But after seconds of silence, the lead pulled his chair, set the report on the table, and said the first words, voice unbelievably calm, "This is evidence, but not the whole story." That pulled everyone back to reality. Hal matching DNA didn't mean guilt, it only proved Hal's hair appeared on the fabric near where Evan was believed to pass that night. This could have many explanations, from accidental contact to fully intentional, but whatever the reason, it brought Hal's name back to case center undeniably. Cold Case Unit immediately rescanned all Hal-related files, once insufficient details now viewed differently. Brown Caprice matching witness descriptions, alibi solely from ex-wife Hal's house location closer to Duck Creek than other owners, vague schedule explanation for the incident night. Plus, old 1990 report noted Caprice left front tire, seemed newer than others, a then unimportant detail now notable in the full picture. The team went to the whiteboard, wrote Hal's name in the middle, then started reconnecting points. Brown Caprice matched multiple witness descriptions, sole alibi, provided by ex-wife, no one else verified. House location within minutes drive radius from Duck Creek. Hair trapped in fabric found near ground push marks. No one said Hal was the perpetrator, but no one could deny, if anyone needed immediate re-investigation, it was Hal Brenner. Many younger officers, unaware of Hal in 1990, asked if he had priors, or violence involvement. Records showed no serious priors, making the DNA match more puzzling and suspicious. In the meeting, the lead made a remark silencing the room. We overlooked Hal not because he was too smart, but because we lacked tools to see what we can see today. The room mood sank. For years, Hal lived as a normal resident, worked, moved, divorced then remarried, unnoticed by anyone. No neighborhood thought him involved. But DNA doesn't care about impressions or personality. DNA only records contact, and that single hair, silent in the fabric for 30 years, was now changing the entire investigation direction. When the meeting ended, Cold Case Unit agreed, Hal Brenner no longer on persons to verify list. He officially became person for deep investigation, and after over 3 decades, for the first time in Evan Cole Ramsey's file, police had a clue leading forward, one strong enough to force them back into Hal's life, step by step, detail by detail, every gap the past overlooked. No one dared say it, but all thought, if the DNA is right, the secret of the night Evan vanished never truly slept. Immediately after the DNA report confirmed a match with Harold Hal Brenner, the Cold Case Unit had no choice but to revisit every old clue related to Hal, especially the brown Caprice that had once been at the center of the 1990 investigation. The existence and disappearance of that car now carried entirely different meaning. Flipping through DMV records again, the team uncovered a detail once overlooked. Hal's Caprice was reported no longer owned in 1991. Just 1 year after Evan vanished, the reporting timing vague, no official sale or transfer papers, just a short note that vehicle no longer operational and disposed of. In the 90s, such declarations weren't rare, and lax old vehicle tracking meant many cars vanished from public records without trace. However, with DNA just confirmed matching Hal, this detail was no longer harmless. An investigator suggested if the car was truly disposed, it likely ended up at one of the large scrapyards around Dallas, Fort Worth in the early 90s. So the team began tracing metal junkyards, still keeping long-term records, hoping for any Caprice info. No one expected anything. Odds of finding traces of a car crushed 30 years ago near zero. But cold cases always hold strange moments where luck and investigator persistence suddenly intersect at an unforeseen point. And this time too, a large scrapyard in Irving, about 30 minutes drive from Garland, still kept manual records from the late 80s and early 90s. Dusty thick ledgers, handwritten entries for each crushed vehicle, VIN scribbled faintly in faded ink. When the cold case unit arrived, the manager, an older man working there nearly 40 years, agreed to let them review all 1991 notes. What no one thought possible happened. In that massive ledger, a faint line nearly skipped by the eye. Chevy Caprice, brown, VIN 80% match, collected from Garland, 1991. That line immediately made everyone stand straight. VIN not fully matching, but 80% meant, with old cars, missing papers, manual logs, match likelihood extremely high. High enough for police to not ignore. The manager said the yard crushed thousands of old cars over 3 decades, but some frames partially crushed or technically faulty were kept in the slow recycle metal area, where too old or heavily oxidized frames were left as unreusable immediately. No one expected this, but as the team was led through that area, a row of rusty frames lay still, stacked under dry hot Texas sky. Steel rusted red, bent, many spots fully crushed, but pieces retained basic shapes. Yard staff said this area held unprocessed frames from long ago, possibly early 90s, he said. With team help, they checked each frame, examining remaining steel for VIN traces. One frame deep in the old metal pile made everyone stop under rust layer. A faint VIN sequence appeared when flashlight hit the right angle. Compared to DMV records, the sequence partially matched Hal's Caprice, exactly the 80% match the 1991 note mentioned. It was the strongest tool they'd had to confirm this was the vehicle linked to Hal Brenner. But what stunned the group wasn't the VIN. It was a tiny thing caught in a torn steel crevice by the rear door of the frame, a dark blue fabric piece, size not much different from the fabric found at Duck Creek 34 years earlier. Fabric frayed, old, brittle with time, but color, fiber structure, and tear style nearly identical. No one spoke for the first seconds. The lead investigator ordered immediate scene documentation, full frame photos, exact fabric position notes, and careful transfer to evidence bag with specialized tools. A technician softly said, "No way this is coincidence." But no one replied, because everyone understood, this was no longer coincidence. The two fabric pieces, sharing near identical traits, one found where Evan passed, one in the crushed Caprice frame, opened a completely new direction. No one rushed to conclude, but the discovery's meaning too clear. Hal Brenner's Caprice didn't just coincidentally disappear a year after the case. It was taken to be crushed, almost right after Evan's disappearance. And the remaining fabric in the rear door, possibly torn from impact or scraping, suggested the car once contacted mud, soil, or something like the fabric. As they transported the frame section back to the analysis center, everyone felt something they'd never felt during this cold case investigation. The case was leading them forward itself. One discovery pulling another, a hair from the first fabric leading to Hal, a 1991 crushed frame leading to the second fabric, a fabric in the frame leading them back to Duck Creek, where Evan passed the night he vanished. All the seemingly disconnected lines were starting to connect in ways no one foresaw. When the rusty Caprice frame was brought into cold case unit storage, The lead investigator stood staring at it long. The car no longer a car, just twisted steel bones of the past, crushed as if to bury something. But time, somehow inexplicably, hadn't crushed everything. A fabric piece still lay there 3 decades, as if patiently waiting to be seen. And that day had come. No one in the room said it aloud, but all understood. For the first time in over 30 years, the Evan Cole Ramsey case was no longer standing still. It's moving, and it's moving fast. When the crushed Caprice frame was brought to Cold Case Unit headquarters, and the dark blue fabric sealed for analysis, the investigation team understood it was time to piece together all the scattered fragments of over 3 decades. DNA from the hair on the first fabric led to Hal Brenner. The second fabric in the 1991 crushed Caprice frame, matching color, shape, tear style. And now, they needed what 1990 investigators couldn't do: reconstruct the possible perpetrator's entire path the night Evan vanished, based on data 34 years had inadvertently left. A large map of Garland, Rowlett and surrounding areas was spread on the meeting table. All key info from old files to new evidence, marked with red, blue, yellow pins. Duck Creek, where Evan was last seen. Payphone on Broadway Boulevard, where the mysterious call was made. Hal Brenner's house, just minutes' drive from Duck Creek. The body discovery area at Rowlett Creek, many miles southeast. And finally, the Irving scrapyard, where the Caprice frame was found. To reconstruct the path, the team used simple but effective forensic geology, comparing soil on the Duck Creek fabric to soil remaining on the 1991 crushed frame. Not soil DNA, but geographic traits, color, particles, minerals. A geologist technician showed the lead investigator the report. Soil sample on Duck Creek fabric matches clay loam composition along the Duck Creek Trail area. Frame soil in Caprice has similar minerals, not absolute match, but same geologic zone. This meant the Caprice once passed through similar area to where Evan walked that night, or at least contacted same soil type. Next, the team cross-referenced timing data. 1990 reports noted Evan's homecoming departure time, family received payphone call time, and likely body placement time at Rowlett Creek. These weren't minute accurate, but enough to build the perpetrator's execution window, from Evan leaving school to early next morning. By placing these markers on the map, and timing travel between points, they built a plausible route. 1 Duck Creek, 2 Payphone Broadway, 3 unidentified attack location, 4 Rowlett Creek, 5 Hal's house, 6 Irving scrapyard, months later. But the most crucial step was aligning this route with Hal Brenner's schedule and home location. Hal lived just minutes' drive from Duck Creek, closer than anyone on the suspect list. From Hal's house to the payphone, a short stretch, few intersections, easy nighttime travel. From payphone to Duck Creek, also just minutes' drive. Rowlett Creek farther, but dozens of small roads and side bridges to the creek bank, roads Hal surely knew well from working at a nearby garage in the early 90s. As the team pinned each marker, a curve connecting the points emerged, not perfect, but logically chilling. An investigator looked at the map and whispered, "This looks like a deliberate route," but they needed more than map coincidence. They needed real-world context, so the team decided on a field drive. One late winter afternoon, as sunlight slanted over old Garland roofs, 2 unmarked police cars, no lights, kept distance, and drove the entire sequence, as it could have happened in 1990. They started at Duck Creek, where Evan walked into darkness. The dirt path still there though repaired, but the isolation unchanged. They drove to the payphone, the old booth gone, but gas station position intact. This leg took 3 minutes, fitting the short interrupted call time frame. From the payphone, they followed roads skirting quiet residential areas, then out to the main road toward Rowlett Creek, just 15 minutes to the body discovery area. If the perpetrator knew the terrain, which Hal could from nearby work, placing the body there at night was feasible. Finally they headed to Irving, where the Caprice was crushed. Distance close enough for someone wanting to dispose of the car in 1991, to bring it unnoticed. When the team returned to Garland, the car atmosphere heavy as lead, everything fit chillingly, not because Hal was concluded guilty, but because this reconstructed route matched every case detail: shortcut call, Evan's disappearance spot, body location, and car's final appearance. But what silenced them longest was the alignment between this route and Hal's statement. In old files, Hal said he was home all evening, but cross-referencing the route, one thing became clear: the body mover could leave home and return in under an hour, if choosing shortest paths. That time perfectly fit the gap in Hal's statement, the gap his ex-wife provided, but no one else confirmed. A young investigator looked at the map and said shakily, if someone wanted to do it, Hal's schedule fits best. Every factor, soil, timing, location, distance, led to the same forensic conclusion: the person moving the body from Garland to Rolette Creek had local knowledge, a vehicle, time, and lived close enough to complete the entire path at night. When the meeting ended, the lead stood, looked at the map once more. He sighed softly and said, "We haven't proven what Hal did, but now we know the perpetrator's path and Hal's path that night are one." That statement didn't declare guilt, but it changed the entire investigation direction. For the first time in over 3 decades, the case was no longer wandering in darkness. Now it had shape, had path, had sequence, had logic, and all led to the same name, the name a tiny hair had awakened from the past: Harold Brenner. As the forensic route was reconstructed and showed a chilling match between the perpetrator's movement path and Hal Brenner's schedule and home location, the cold case unit understood they had entered a phase where any small detail, once seen as meaningless, could carry the weight to change the entire case. At this point, everything related to Hal needed re-examination. Investigators began digging deep into his personal records from late 1990, including work history, residence records, and even medical files, documents the initial team rarely had conditions to cross-check thoroughly like now. Amid the old medical pages, mostly about colds, minor injuries, or routine checkups, an investigator suddenly stopped at a short faded black ink line in the November 1990 record, just weeks after the night Evan vanished. The line read, "Bite mark on neck area, semicircular, bruised skin, suspected human bite, prescribed antibiotics." Simple note, no added context, no further description, but it made the whole team pause. A bite. On the neck. Recorded timing right in Evan's disappearance window. And Hal never mentioned this detail in any interrogation over 3 decades. In normal context, a bite could have many causes, but in a case where the victim likely resisted, with light struggle signs at Duck Creek, and where fabric with Hal's DNA was found, this detail couldn't be dismissed. Cold Case Unit immediately contacted the recording doctor, now retired, but vaguely remembering some odd cases then. When asked, he confirmed Hal's bite looked more human-caused than animal, but didn't recall Hal's explanation. He only remembered prescribing meds and advising against infection. No one then thought to note detailed cause, as Hal just said it was scratch from minor scuffle. Younger investigators looked at each other, because even in 1990, a family doctor couldn't guess the injury might link to a disappearance. Now, Cold Case Unit needed to know if the bite could directly relate to Evan. They immediately contacted forensics to check Evan's autopsy for any dental patterns or marks on the body. But with the body found after nearly 2 months and heavily environmentally impacted, identifying skin marks was nearly impossible. However, they had a data source 1990 couldn't exploit Evan's dental mold from high school orthodontic treatment records. The family still kept in an old file cabinet. When Cold Case Unit contacted Evan's mom, she didn't know those once meaningless dental records were becoming a new case piece. She brought a faded envelope containing X-rays and plaster dental mold done by Evan's dentist when he was 15. Forensics received the files, conducted basic comparison, determined if Evan's dental pattern could create the semicircular bite like the medical note on Hal. This wasn't legal conclusion. Since Hal's bite sample no longer existed, only doctor's verbal description, but forensic examiner could assess shape feasibility. When they enlarged the 1990 medical injury sketch, a very rough pen marking position and bite curve, then placed next to Evan's dental model, forensics gave initial assessment, fully possible, the bite was made by teeth size and structure similar to Evan's, not 100% confirmable, not prosecutable evidence, but it fit in size, arch width, and Evan's incisors' slight gap, matching the uneven curve described in Hal's record. A forensic tech said softly, if someone thrashed to escape and tried biting to fight, the mark would look like that. When this info entered the investigation file, the meeting room atmosphere shifted noticeably. Pieces started attaching themselves unexpectedly. Hal had hair trapped on Duck Creek fabric. Hal's Caprice had same type fabric in 1991 crushed frame. Reconstructed forensic route, perfectly matched Hal's possible path that night. And now, Hal had a bite at exactly Evan's disappearance time. The lead investigator set the file on the table, looked at the case map, hanging on the wall nearly a year. Once unrelated details were gradually pulling into one line from Duck Creek Trail, interrupted payphone, vanished Caprice, to Rowlett Creek. He said softly, almost to himself, the bite isn't charging evidence, but it's the victim's final small scream. A heavy silence covered the room. Not confusion's silence, but realization's, holding not suspicion anymore. It was sign. It was direction. It was strong circumstantial evidence of a struggle, and the only file person with matching injury. For the first time since 1990, they no longer asked, who could do this? Now they asked, why did Hal never mention this bite? And more importantly, how did Evan fight back in his final moment? The rest of the story, and Hal Brenner's fate, would be decided from that question. As circumstantial evidence began converging in one direction, hair, two fabrics, crushed frame, route match, and strange medical bite, the cold case unit knew they were entering a phase where whatever happened next could completely change the landscape. But they didn't expect the next turning point from something unbuyable, unlab analyzable, unforceable, a human memory, silent for 34 years. 1 May 2025 morning, at Cold Case Unit office, the duty clerk received a strange call. The man's voice on the line trembled slightly, struggling between wanting to speak and not daring. He said one sentence enough for the duty investigator to note immediately. I think I saw Evan that night, and I think he got into Hal Brenner's car. A long pause froze the duty room. The man said he didn't want to talk over phone. He wanted in person, and only after confirming the investigator was Cold Case Unit did he agree to come that afternoon. When he entered the interview room, no one on the team recognized him. He was elderly, much gray hair, weary posture, eyes heavy like carrying a burden half a lifetime. He introduced as Cliff Harrison, lived near Duck Creek through 80s and 90s, but moved long ago. He said he'd told himself to stay silent, from fear, regret, not knowing if what he saw was what he thought. But now I can't stay quiet anymore, he said, voice breaking in segments. Investigator asked what he saw the night Evan vanished. Cliff sighed long before answering, then he told. That night, he was driving home after late shift at an old warehouse near Walnut Street. Passing the road into Duck Creek, he saw a young man walking, slim build, slightly long hair, thin jacket. He believed it was Evan, as few teens out that late in the area. Cliff didn't know Evan personally, but had seen him around school enough to recognize the look. As his car passed, he noticed a brown Caprice parked not far, by the dark trees. Then he didn't connect anything, just thought someone sitting inside. But seconds later, glancing in rear view, he saw what kept him silent, 34 years. Evan stopped by the car, passenger door cracked open, not fully, just enough for someone inside to signal. Evan looked in, then, hesitantly but clearly, he stepped into the passenger seat. Cliff remembered that moment like a burn in memory. He looked around a bit before opening the door, he recounted, like he knew the person inside, or thought it safe. Investigator asked, "Did you see who was in the car?" Cliff shook head, but he remembered plate unclear, only first letters blurry, like LJ or LL, and car color dull brown old long body style. "Very few cars that color in my neighborhood," he said. And years later, I knew Hal Brenner drove a brown Caprice. I recognized it because Hal lived not far from me. This stunned the interview room. Investigator asked, "So why stay silent, 34 years?" Cliff looked down, his voice shook. "Because Hal came to my house once, just once, days after Evan vanished. He talked normally, asked if I heard anything strange that night. But the way he looked at me," Cliff paused, hands clenching. He said, "It's dark around here. At night no one sees anyone," normal tone. "But I felt he wanted to know if I saw anything." That ambiguity kept Cliff silent for years. He feared if he spoke what he saw, he'd be in trouble. Feared he missaw. Feared being pulled into something he couldn't fully understand. However, hearing the case reopened, he said old fear rose, but this time not fear of Hal, but fear he'd carry the secret to his grave, and bury truth forever. "I can't stay quiet forever," he said, eyes tearing. "I saw that boy get in the car. That's the truth." The lead investigator stayed calm, noting every detail. When asked if sure the car was Hal's, Cliff answered cautiously, "I can't be 100%, but car shape like the one he drove, paint like, body style like, and back then, brown Caprice is rare." That statement wasn't direct evidence, but it was the first account after 34 years describing clear interaction between Evan and a Caprice, linked to Hal through other evidence. And most importantly, not absolute certainty, but the fear keeping that account silent. 3 decades, rare, unless the witness truly believed they saw something suspicious. The interview ended in choked atmosphere. As Cliff left the room, he turned and said the line silencing everyone. "I don't know what he did, I just know Evan got in that car, and never got out." In the meeting room, no one spoke, because all understood that statement, combined with DNA fabrics, frame, route and bite, formed the strongest chain the case ever had. And after 34 years, the past finally spoke. The only question left, what will Hal Brenner say when faced with it all? After the interview with Cliff Harrison, the cold case unit atmosphere shifted noticeably. The scattered 34-year evidence, hair fabrics, crushed Caprice frame, medical bite, forensic route, and now witness statement, formed a tight enough event chain to present to the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. The meeting lasted hours, each data point placed on the table, not as separate pieces, but intersecting lines forming one story's shape. By the end, the prosecutor nodded, slowly, heavily, and signed the document Garland PD awaited over 3 decades. Arrest warrant for Harold Hal Brenner, on first-degree murder charge. Law enforcement mobilized that night. Hal had moved to Rockwall years earlier, living in a quiet neighborhood near Lake Ray Hubbard. They didn't want noise, but couldn't risk him vanishing again. At 6 a.m., Rockwall sky still thin-fogged, a SWAT team in vests, no sirens, quietly stopped before Hal's house. They waited for the lead investigator, who'd carried Evan's file for years, to step out first. No one spoke much. This was the moment everyone understood, past would collide directly with present. When they knocked, Hal stepped out, grayer hair, somewhat weary posture. He saw many officers on the porch, eyes flickered, but showed little emotion. The lead read the warrant, each word clear in the early neighborhood, stillness. Hal just stood, no protest, no why, no immediate lawyer demand. He extended hands as cuffs clicked on wrists, motion almost strangely calm, as if he'd waited for this moment, or once thought it would come. Neighbors opened doors peering as Hal was led down steps. A woman clutched her shawl tight to chest, muttering, "Hal really, gentle Hal," but their shock left behind as patrol car door closed and the convoy left Rockwall in long silence. At Garland PD headquarters, Hal was brought to interview room 3. Cold room, white light glaring on metal table. The lead placed before him the undeniable photo of dark blue fabric at Duck Creek, photo of second fabric in Caprice frame, DNA results, movement route map, medical record photo, noting bite, and finally, Cliff Harrison's statement transcript. As the file stack was pushed before Hal, he looked down long, but touched nothing. Investigator asked, "Want to explain why your DNA is on fabric found where Evan passed that night?" Hal didn't answer. He kept gaze steady. No fear flicker, no discomfort. "Why take the Caprice to be crushed in 1991? Why does the remaining frame have fabric identical to Duck Creek's?" Still no response. A long silence. He looked up at the wall surveillance camera, as if watching himself from outside. When the investigator pulled Evan's dental mold file and placed next to Hal's medical bite description, he slightly shifted, but still silent. "Want to tell what happened that night?" the lead asked, voice lowering. No answer. Only Hal's even breathing and ceiling vent fan's light hum. After minutes silent as hours, Hal exhaled long, then leaned back in chair, eyes to ceiling. "I have nothing to say," he said. The only sentence. One more closing than the evidence before him. No admission, no denial. Just silence. A silence investigators couldn't tell was innocent calm or long secret lockdown. When the first interrogation ended, Hal was taken to Garland PD temporary holding. Outside the hall, no one spoke much. All understood a man could stay silent, but evidence couldn't. And after 34 years, the Evan Cole Ramsey case finally entered the phase no one dared believe it would reach. Direct confrontation with the only man every trace led to. But the biggest question remained unanswered. How long will Hal stay silent? And can the truth Evan left buried 34 years be silenced once more? The trial of Harold Hal Brenner was scheduled to open in September 2025, but from early summer, the Dallas County Courthouse was already packed with reporters, former investigators, and people who lived in the Garland area in the 90s. Those who never thought the Evan Cole Ramsey case would reach this point after more than 3 decades of darkness. When Hal was brought into the courtroom, he maintained the same silence as the days of his arrest, eyes sunken, face expressionless, body slightly rigid, like someone trying to hide something or keep himself detached from the outside world. On the prosecution side, the evidence was arranged in clear forensic sequence, no emotion, no speculation, only what time had left behind. They started with DNA, the small hair found in the fabric, recovered from Duck Creek, a complete match with Hal's reference sample per DPS Austin's mtDNA analysis. Next was fiber evidence, 2 dark blue fabric pieces, one from the Duck Creek Trail, one from the crushed Caprice frame in Irving, presented to the jury under white light, showing nearly identical fraying color and weave pattern, something anyone could see as a connection no one discovered 3 decades earlier. Then the timeline data. The prosecutor projected the reconstructed perpetrator route map, a curve connecting Duck Creek, payphone Rolette Creek, back to Garland Residential, all matching the time Hal was said to be home, while the alibi came only from his ex-wife's single statement and unconfirmed by anyone else. The prosecutor stated clearly, the gap in Mr. Brenner's statement is enough time to complete the entire forensic reconstructed route. Older investigators, who worked the case in 1990, sat in the back rows silently watching the map, something technology then couldn't build. Next, the prosecution presented Hal's 1990 medical record, semicircular bite on the neck area, noted just weeks after the night Evan vanished. No one claimed it was Evan's bite, but when the boy's dental model was projected beside the injury sketch, the jury saw the similarity in arch width, uneven curve, and slight gap between incisors, a feature matching the 1990 doctor's note. The prosecutor said, "We don't present this as definitive perpetrator proof. We present it as trace of a struggle." The courtroom fell silent, but the trial's turning moment came from something not in a lab. Cliff Harrison's memory, carrying fear for 34 years. When Cliff took the stand, he shook like standing trial for his own mistake. He recounted that night, every small detail, his car headlights, illuminating Evan's walking figure, the brown Caprice parked by the dark trees, the door cracked open, and the moment Evan hesitated then stepped in. The entire courtroom went dead quiet when he said the line buried nearly half his life. "I saw the boy get into that car, and I believe the person inside was Hal." Defense counsel immediately objected, arguing 34-year-old memory couldn't be absolutely reliable, that the witness might confuse or be influenced by later hearsay. But prosecution was prepared. They projected 1990 DMV records, proving only 3 brown Caprices in Garland Range, 2 confirmed not leaving parking spots the night Evan vanished. The remaining 1 owned by Hal Brenner. They continued with the timing. Hal disposed of the Caprice in 1991 exactly, no sale papers, no transfer, just declared broken, disposed at a time matching when Evan's body was found. When the Irving scrapyard was mentioned, and the jury saw photos of the twisted Caprice frame pulled from metal piles, many bowed heads, not from fear, but feeling like witnessing the past returning for justice. On the defense side, Hal stayed silent. His attorney argued, mtDNA doesn't determine when the hair fell onto the fabric. No direct evidence Hal met Evan that night. No one proved Hal drove out of the house. Witness Cliff's memory too old. But prosecution kept pulling the case back to the 34-year unbreakable logic chain. Each piece alone may be suspicion, but together they tell a story Mr. Brenner can't explain. As the trial entered day 6, the lead investigator, who followed the case nearly 20 years, was called to the stand. He didn't recount the team's obsession, nights back at Duck Creek, or time the file was buried in steel cabinets. He only said, "I stand here as the one restoring voice to a child who never got to tell his story." Then he pointed to the forensic route map. "This is the perpetrator's path, and this is the path Mr. Brenner could have taken. The 2 paths are one." Hal sat still, hands clasped, gaze unchanged. No denial, no objection, just submerged in silence, like the past 34 years. At day's end, prosecution closed with a line not accusing, not charging, but emphasizing truth. Evan Cole Ramsey fought back. A bite remained, a hair remained, a fabric remained, a witness remained, all lead to one person. The entire courtroom swallowed words. Starting tomorrow, the jury would enter deliberation. The truth buried in silence for 34 years was now one step from verdict. The jury took over 2 days to deliberate, rereading every file page, reviewing every fabric photo, DNA report, crushed Caprice frame, reconstructed forensic route, medical bite record, and Cliff Harrison's statement, the man carrying fear for 34 years. When they returned to the courtroom on the 3rd morning, the atmosphere was so thick, no one in the gallery breathed hard. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" And the 4-person stood, hand holding the white paper, trembling slightly but voice steady. "We find the defendant Harold Brenner guilty of first-degree murder." Whispers spread through the courtroom, not from surprise, but because the moment Garland waited over 3 decades had finally arrived. Hal Brenner, the man who lived quietly in Rockwall neighborhoods, passing middle age unnoticed, now stood in court as the last shadow of a 34-year secret. He didn't shout, didn't protest, just looked straight ahead, gaze unreadable as regret or emptiness. The judge sentenced life without parole, the maximum under laws applying to the 1990 crime. In that moment, no applause, no cheers. Only heavy silence of a community closing a wound left open too long. Garland PD immediately held a press conference, releasing the final investigation report, a document over 400 pages, compiling the entire case from 1990 to 2025. The report not only recorded evidence convicting Hal Brenner, but systematized every early error. 1990 forensic limits, undetected hair, Caprice vanished before hold order, inconsistent witness statements, and especially the 34-year gap degrading evidence over time. Not to blame, but to accurately record how a case can drift into oblivion without technology, persistence, and strange luck. The report also devoted large sections describing the reopening, processing old evidence bags, hair discovery under modern microscope, mtDNA at DPS Austin, geologic match between Duck Creek and Caprice frame, forensic route, reconstructing perpetrator path, and finally the sole witness daring return after 34 years. The combination of modern forensics plus old data, plus buried testimony, created weight enough to bring the case to light. At the press conference, the lead investigator, who pursued Evan's file nearly 2 decades, stood at the mic and said calmly, but choked, "We can't return the 34 lost years, but we can say this, Evan was not forgotten." He also clarified the case would be national cold case training material, included in Texas Rangers, DPS Austin, and many veteran units programs. In that material, the Evan Cole Ramsey case became a classic example for 3 key points. 1. No evidence is too small. A hair thinner than dust can break 3 decades silence. 2. A crushed car doesn't mean the past is destroyed. Twisted steel still holds fabric and truth. 3. A witness can stay silent 30 years, but when they speak, their words can turn the entire case. Those lines were recorded in training programs as reminders to every young investigator that cold cases never die if someone is willing to reopen. After the report's release, the Evan Cole Ramsey file was officially closed. Evan's family, in a small statement post-trial, said little about Hal, no mention of anger or hate. His mother only said, "Evan deserved to be found," and finally, "My son has been found." Outside the courthouse, Garland sky lightly sunny, exactly like early fall 1990 days, when Evan left homecoming and stepped into darkness by Duck Creek. But this time, no more darkness. The case Garland once thought would forever be an unhealed scar, now became one of Texas's most notable successful cold cases, taught in classes, analyzed in seminars, archived as proof that time can be slow, but justice sometimes finds its way back. When the file closed, Garland PD wrote one final line on the cover: "Case closed. Justice achieved. 34 years, and the truth finally spoke." Looking back at the 34-year journey from the night Evan vanished at Duck Creek to Hal Brenner's conviction, this story is not just a criminal case, but a mirror into American life today. We see a small hair trapped on fabric in Garland, a fabric remnant on a crushed Caprice frame in Irving, a bite once overlooked in medical records, and Cliff Harrison's testimony, buried for 34 years, all seemingly disconnected, but when pieced together changed an entire case's fate. In a vast country where crime news appears daily, Evan's story reminds us no detail is too small to matter, from noticing a strange car in the neighborhood, to unease seeing something off, or carefully preserving papers, records, evidence. It also sends a direct message to every citizen: silence, from fear, as Cliff did, can unintentionally prolong suffering for a family and community. Daring to speak truth, even late, can be the final piece completing justice's path. For law enforcement, Garland PD's final report, turning the Evan case into cold case training material, is a reminder technology changes, but most important is persistence, and refusing to give up. In today's America, where many easily lose faith in the system, this case quietly says justice can come late, but it needs us all: neighbors willing to speak, investigators never quitting, and society valuing truth, no matter how painful. If you want to keep following cold case breakthroughs like Evan Ramsey's, hit subscribe to not miss any story. Thank you for joining, and see you in the next video, where we continue bringing truth from darkness back to light.